Actually, the Syria issue has taken over G20 discussions, which, as we know, are meant to be about the global economy. And I think America is increasingly feeling a bit isolated. What is actually more critical is next week, there's a vote in the US Congress. But globally now, the Pope has recommended that we move towards a peaceful solution. The UN is also thinking about an international peace convention in Geneva. And I think there's now a rallying cry for an alternative solution to military strikes on Syria.
Yeah.
It's interesting, isn't it? So we could bring in the South China Morning Post at the same time, because that's looking at the economic side.
And that's coming from China. Don't you love it?
Absolutely.
The communist country worried about economics and the global economy.
Well, it is. And interestingly, in this whole Syria debate, Russia has actually taken the lead amongst the two countries who are opposed to Syrian strikes. For China, China's economy is facing a potential recovery. Manufacturing figures recently have been good. And China is one of the world's biggest importers of crude oil. And we know potential strike on Syria, which then leads to contagion in the Middle East, could basically take supplies off the market. So that is a critical economic threat for many parts of the world, including the emerging markets.
And there is a great likeliness or likelihood that we will see markets. I mean, if there is a strike, even if it's a short-term thing,
even though Syria doesn't produce much oil.
No, it's not Syria. It's the region,
it's really about region. Syria is only 30,000 barrels a day, and already markets are tightening because Libyan supplies are already off the market a great amount. So for China, this is a potential issue due to its imports of crude oil.
And the other thing we should have, not only just oil, but a hugely important shipping region. Passageways that connect the world.
Absolutely, the Straits of Hormuz as well as the Suez Canal as well.
Canal. Absolutely. Okay, shall we move on to this? Talk about what's in The Guardian. The headline, exclusive, how US and Britain unlock privacy on the internet. I always think once it's out there, it's pretty hard to protect it all.
Well, this is another raft of revelations coming from the Edward Snowden cache of documents that he released. And The Guardian in the UK has been leading on this story, as you know, making a real feature on this issue. How important is it, do you think, that our medical records, our banking details can be looked upon by various people in government agencies? I mean, does it matter?
Well, I mean, there's a real dilemma here with protection against terrorism, which everyone obviously would be in support of, as well as personal privacy. And what is particularly shocking about these revelations is the scale and the concerted effort. I mean, $250 million being spent annually on tackling and overcoming encryption technology with some of the big service providers. We're talking Hotmail, Google, Yahoo, Facebook.
And it's their collusion, isn't it, with the authorities?
Exactly.
That's quite striking.
And the collusion. And the interesting thing is, where does this sit in the court of public opinion? Because the GCHQ, the UK intelligence, have estimated that there would be a moderate risk in terms of public perception of this particular program, which is quite revealing in terms of how they view what the rest of us will see as an invasion of privacy. And I think there's potentially going to be a political fallout in potentially the US and the UK over this.
We shall see. There's a lot more to come from this story, isn't there, The Guardian? Go on to the EFT now.
Should we talk about that?
Yes.
About yesterday we had the decision, the non-decision, once again, no surprise, from the Bank of England, the European Central Bank. Record low interest rates remain on hold. No hint as to when, but we're seeing some pretty decent signs coming out of the UK
Some decent
economy.
signs, but, you know, it's interesting because everything the various central banks are saying, markets don't seem to be adhering to. Markets essentially having a life of their own. What is interesting is where the US jobs figures are going to go and whether tapering will actually have such a wide-ranging impact on the global economy. Already emerging markets are potentially one of the immediate victims of this, which is these speculative capital flows that could flood out of emerging markets. We're already seeing countries like India and China with potential jitters, with currencies and trading exiting many of those markets. I think it'd be interesting to watch what the Fed Open Market Committee do in the coming weeks, because that could potentially be significant for what other parts of the world
for developed economies. It hasn't been. So we keep hearing it's not too bad. Actually, the money flowing out of the emerging economies is actually going to the back, so
back
to speak.
to developed
so
economies.
It's like we're seeing this shift again.
Is it a
aren't we?
rebalancing? Is it a shift
Yeah.
back towards the West and the developed economies? Emerging markets are still an important driver of global demand as well.
Yeah, absolutely.
All right. If you had to choose Madrid, Tokyo, or Istanbul for the Olympics, who would you go with? Madrid, which is broke, Tokyo, which is not too far from a nuclear meltdown in Fukushima, and Istanbul, which was the scene, as you know, of some fairly vibrant protests, anti-government protests.
I think that's putting me on the spot, but I think each of the cities have pros and cons. Madrid, unemployment rates in Spain now, 20%, over 20%. So it certainly could do with infrastructure
Over 60%
boost.
for the young people.
Over 60% youth unemployment rates. But Tokyo as well, the problem is here, and the potential headache and worries for Fukushima. Istanbul, it would be particularly significant because, you know, the IOC could potentially be following the footsteps of FIFA, which has also awarded the World Cup to countries which have never hosted it. So the Olympics going to Istanbul, I think, would be particularly groundbreaking.
Okay, we're going to quit. We've only got about less than a minute left. This art, $55 million. I think paid for about $1.5 million. Investors love something, you know, alternate investments.
Yeah, and you could possibly see this as a good news consumer story, if you like, from $1.5 million if you've got $50 million. And this art collector, Peter Brant, who owns the orange version of Jeff Koon's pop artistry, as I call it, this inflatable doll, potentially could reap $55 million. I mean, I think in the current economic climate, that would be quite a significant thing. But there might be a surprise bid from the Middle East or Asia, actually.